Hey now,
Hey now!
this is what dreams are made of.
This is where we lose all our followers. Mariah!
Austin Boone.
What's up, Boonies? I'm Austin.
I'm Mariah,
And we're the Boons. There you go.
I almost forgot.
Oh,
okay.
wow. All right. Episode 3. We're here. We made it.
Still going strong.
I wouldn't say strong, but we're still going.
We're still here.
We're still going.
Still doing it.
So, I really got to... That little thing that I did on last episode, if I keep doing it, smack me.
Deal.
So...
Sorry, I was just practicing.
Almost did it again. I felt it coming. I don't know where that came from. Anyway, recapping episode 2.
Yep.
How'd you feel about kind of walking through our stories, how the roads came together and crossed, and how'd that go for you?
Yeah, I think it went well. I mean, you could probably tell if you listened last week, but I could talk forever about our story because I like to talk about it because it's cool. So I enjoyed talking through that, and I think just realizing all the threads God's weaving through our stories and still is continuing to weave. So I had fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
What'd you think?
I thought it went well. I thought it was a good direction to go in to kind of lay the foundation so people know a little bit more about us, especially our Auburn family, as we continue to kind of replant our roots here, since you've told me we're not moving again.
Nope. I'm not changing classrooms again.
So, changing schools. You might change classrooms within the school.
You are not going to be the reason I change
There
classrooms
you go.
again.
Okay.
My boss is a good reason, but I will not change for you.
So yeah, I thought episode 2 went well. I again, it's our story, so it's fun to tell. I think it let people in a little bit more, and again, just kind of lays a little bit more foundation for where we've been, where we are, and where we hope to go.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the point of the podcast. So, episode 3, what are we talking about?
Talking about blended families.
Families with blenders in the kitchen.
We do have that too.
Is that not a blended family?
No, blended family as in. How do you even define a blended family?
This last week when we mentioned that was the first time I'd ever heard that phrase.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm not very educated.
Okay, well, I'm about to just ramble through this to find the answer. But blended families, as in like, there is a child in the picture whose biological parents are not in the same house, or something about that is different. So like step parents, it usually could involve like step siblings, half siblings.
Okay, I'm following
divorce,
you. The Brady Bunch.
Not divorced, but we're not married. Yeah, Brady Bunch is the classic example.
Okay.
For a certain audience that I don't think is watching our podcast right now, but that's okay.
Not yet. But when they find out that we're a modern day Brady family, Brady Bunch.
We still got a few more kids we would need to add to get there.
That's true.
Yeah, okay.
So, plan, there it goes again. We're going to talk about blended families, our experience with them, Mariah's point of view, my point of view, being the one bringing the kid into the situation, your point of view coming into that situation. Then we'll answer any questions that we got, and then we'll give you our update on the 5 C's. We have our sheets right there. We talked about it earlier personally, so ready to bring you guys on that journey as well. So
absolutely.
All right.
Let's get it
blended
started.
Families for the next 2 hours.
No. Absolutely not.
So blended families. Let's kind of approach this in a dialogue, a back and forth, as we talk about things that we've dealt with, processed through, the hard things, the fun things, all that. So let's kind of go before. So thoughts on single Mariah, the Mariah we heard about last week.
Very single Mariah.
Yeah, exactly. Very single Mariah. Single as a Pringle. Even that phrase I've heard, but Pringles come in a can with a lot of Pringles.
So I was more single than a Pringle.
There you go. That should be the new phrase. More single than a Pringle. So, what views on guys with kids before? Was there ever even in all the fairy tales and fantasies growing up as a little girl, like I'm gonna marry someone with a kid? Like, what was that like before
It was
meeting me?
not even close to being on the radar. So, like, before you were in the picture at all, like, obviously, people have kids and
That'll
then
be on
date.
episode 6.
Okay. But, like, obviously, there are people who have kids who, for a variety of reasons, are dating. And so, like, I knew it was out there, but also never thought that would be for me. And I think there was a little bit of like arrogance in that sense of like, no, no, thank you. But also in the sense of just like, well, that's not the traditional, that's not how it goes. That's not how go to college, meet a guy, graduate, get married, live a
The
happy
order.
life. Exactly. Um, and I was living a fairly straight and narrow life. So I had not put myself in a situation to have my own kid before I was married. And so I was like, okay, not really on my radar at all. The end.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, straight and narrow. So that means I was on the
Then I
wide.
met you.
I was on the wide and windy.
Well,
Right.
judgmental Mariah would have thought so.
Exactly.
And then you associate a person with a situation and it kind of changes things.
Yeah.
So what about you? Are we going back to you now?
Yeah.
So for you, I'm about to ask you a question you're probably not expecting.
Oh.
Before you had a kid,
Mm-hmm.
what was your opinion on people with kids dating or any experience?
I mean, it was the same
that?
way. Growing up in a house, I think one of the things we talked about, and I think even maybe it was Chuck and Lydia. They'll probably get shouted out all out on this podcast. They've helped shape our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe it was them when we first, or no, maybe it was Olin and Lena when we first started doing premarital or even pre-engagement counseling, when they were talking about like how long have your parents been together,
Mm-hmm.
and my parents have been together, I mean, since before I was born, and I'm 30, so 30 plus years. Your
Mm-hmm.
parents have been together
Almost 35 years, I think.
Yeah, which is just in this day and age very uncommon. So I remember that was something that even at the beginning, I think it was Olin and
It
Lena were
was
like, that is
the
uncommon and that is
statistical
amazing.
probability of having two people's parents still together is
And then I even think
crazy.
that Chuck and Lydia, a
Mhm.
different couple who were not really communicating with Olin and Lena about our ongoing engagement, even kind of made the same comment. So again, like I grew up in a very similar situation. Like both parents were present, like go to school, get your degree, date, marry, buy a house, be financially ready for a kid,
Mhm.
have a kid. Like all those things were stepping stones to having a kid. So I don't know. Again, growing up in Mountain Brook, it was very results driven, very outward appearance. Everything's put together like all the time. So that part of me might have like looked down on someone. I was like, "Ooh, I can't believe that person had a kid out of wedlock. Like that's wild. Like, ooh, gossip." So I mean, I think that would have been my initial reactions. I mean, it's not something I thought about all the time because
Mhm.
again, it's not something that happened all the time in Mount
Right.
Brook, or if it did, it was swept under the
I was about to
rug.
say, yeah, you ignore it and hide it and
So
cover up.
yeah, it's one of those things where I didn't really think about a whole lot. But I think looking back, I would have never thought it would have happened to me. It's always one of those things like, oh, it happens to other people, won't happen to me,
Mhm.
those kind of things. So yeah, wasn't even on my radar. Hadn't thought about it. Probably would have judged those people unrightfully. So yeah, that's before that. So then fast forward in our stories, you meet me, fall madly in love with me the first time you see me. We heard about
Yeah.
that last time. Sparks flew, fires ignited, all that stuff.
Took a minute. But yeah.
But even before, you knew I had a kid. So walk
Right.
us through some of those thoughts even before. So this is before you're committed to like I'm going to let him pursue me.
Mhm.
I'm going to reciprocate the pursuits. What was that kind of like before of like, oh wait, he has a kid.
Yeah, well, like we said last week, I knew you had a kid before you were even on my radar as
Mhm.
like dating potential. So like that almost went into me not being interested in you because I was like, well, I mean, he has a kid, so I don't know what his life is like or what led to that. But like,
Wild.
okay, well, I really thought so, but it's okay.
I get that.
But when you started showing interest in me, at first, like the kid thing, like I was aware of it, but it didn't really play into my thoughts. I was like, oh, this guy's interested in me. Like he seems really great. Ah,
Single as a
yay!
Pringle. Yeah.
Yeah, ring by spring, not really. But I almost forgot about it and
Mm-hmm.
was able to focus just on you and on your pursuit of me. But then very early on to you texting me and us talking, I talked to my sister because who else would I talk to about those
Shout out
things?
Hannah, his song.
Yeah. And so actually, she was in Birmingham that week. I do remember that because you and I were setting up when we were actually going to go on our first date. And I remember her sitting in my condo and I was like, okay, Hannah, big sister advice here. So I might have a date. She's like, oh my goodness, yay. But this guy has a kid. And
What was her reaction?
she was like, well, she was very gracious. She was like, okay, tell me more. And was just let me talk. And so through that, and I had this conversation with a couple of different
Mm-hmm.
people, but really was able to say, like, for me, I was like, okay, what are the biblical grounds of this? Like, what would the situation be in where me entering into a relationship with the intent to figure out if you're the person to marry, where that could potentially put me in a situation that contradicts God's law and God's will for
Mm-hmm.
us. So that was the first thing, which kind of, so part of that was like, I need to figure out what, like, I need to figure out Austin's story. I need to figure out Red's story. I need to figure out what led to this. Um, but really, I was like, I just need to go in and ask and figure out what was going
Mm-hmm.
on. And while it was not what I expected to date a guy with a kid or to like go on a date with a kid, it was also not a red flag for me. So I think that's where I
It was
landed.
more like a soft yellow.
I mean, it was a yellow.
Oh.
It was a yellow. Um, and half of that was just me wanting to know more.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll be honest, the other half, which we'll get into this in a second, was like me worrying what other people would think.
Mm-hmm.
Because the reality is like if I started dating you and I didn't really think through all this at the time, but then like going out with you and your kid, now people could think like I have a kid and I'm not old enough to have a kid
Mm-hmm.
that age.
Yeah.
And so taking on some of that too. So that was on my mind, but I just decided to go into our relationship with questions and figure it out and take it step by step. And it never became a red flag and quickly stopped being a yellow flag.
Cool.
So, what was it like for you? Of like, even before me, what was it like dating while also having a kid?
It was tough. It's We've got some stuff to unpack in later episodes as we figure out not what, when
Mm-hmm.
we're ready to share certain things about our lives, mainly mine. But so there's already feelings of inadequacy, unworthiness. Like I feel like there's a lot of baggage, and then a kid is like a lot of that other baggage was like stuff deep down inside no one could see, and I could button it up. Can't button up a freaking 3-year-old waddling around the store, following you around, as cute as they are. So that was tough. Now I did through a lot of like godly guidance, godly wisdom from a bunch of men who were discipling me through the process, even beforehand, was able to like keep him, like when I was dating people,
Mm-hmm.
keep him from that situation. And even in some, I'd gone to counseling and stuff like that for myself, and even seeing different attachment styles, different ways, like based off of how you parent, how you interact with your kid, all these things, like how you can really wrongfully rewire some things to where like down the road it impacts the way that they
Mm-hmm.
interact with people and connect to people. And so having gone through that, I feel like I was almost like very cautious of like there might have been girls I dated who were like, I want to meet your kid, and I was like, nah, no, not yet. And it wasn't really, luckily I think it was God's way of being like, no, I like don't do that to him. But in my head it's not that like, oh, you're not like worthy of meeting him, but it was like I need to protect him
Mm-hmm.
from this for a little while longer. So, but I mean, it was hard whenever there was people. I mean, every time I would come across someone where I was like, oh, I might want to pursue this person. Again, I'm in toxic relationship after toxic relationship. Like I'm doing things incorrectly this whole time. But even when it's kind of like, shoot, at some point, if they don't know I have a kid, like I'm gonna have to have that
Right.
conversation, and no, no person in their right mind is going to be like, oh, you have a kid, like I'm okay with that. Like everyone's gonna run for the hills, and so like to me, there was a lot of baggage and a lot of explanation and a lot of like, I just, I don't know, and almost kept me from pursuing and dating
Yeah.
people for a long time. And even with you, I mean, I knew since I'd put it out there, and I don't know if he had ever been at the gym while you were working
I don't
out.
think
It
so.
got to a point where I was like, you know what, this kid, I mean, I'm his father, he's part of my life. Like when he's in town, he's at work with me, things like that. So
Right.
it got to the point where I was like, I don't care, I'm gonna meet the person. But that, for the first, I mean, so crazy story. Maybe leave you guys on a cliffhanger. Maybe Mariah will be like, tell him. I mean, I didn't know about or meet this kid.
Yeah, we haven't
Let's call
covered
him
that one
Charles since
yet.
that's his name. I didn't know about him or meet him until he was 18 months old, a year and a half old. Then I met him immediately, was like, okay, how do I father him? What role do I play in his life? And again, a lot of godly counsel and wisdom helped me through that. A lot of help from my parents. Shout out Kathy and Steve, and Aunt Carol and Meemaw. Lots of help
Yeah,
as
yeah.
a single father trying to figure things out. So don't know exactly where I was going with that, but yeah, a lot of fear of what people would think
Yeah.
kept me from, I think, a lot of opportunities. But as Rascal Flat says, God bless the broken road that led me straight to you. So,
Oh, that's really
right.
sweet. Yeah. What do you think? Because I have my answer for this, but I want to hear from you first. So, for our relationship, so
Mhm.
you find the girl crazy enough to not run away by the fact that you have a kid. What do you think was good? Like, what were some good things about, yes, there's this kid there, but I'm also dating this woman? Like, was there anything good about that? But also, what were some challenges too?
Good about dating you.
Or like good things about us and our relationship starting and forming with Charles being there when he did get entered into the picture of us? Or like good memories?
What were the good things that led me to being like, sure, I don't know exactly
Well,
where
I
you're going with
really am
this. It's kind of
asking.
worded oddly.
Well, here's why. Because I was going to ask, what were the hard things about dating, even in our relationship? Like, what was
Why
hard?
didn't you just say that?
But I also don't want this to just be like, man, this was hard.
But it
Like,
was. It was
it
hard at times. It
was.
was easy at times. It sucked at times. It was great at
Okay, so
times.
tell us what was hard.
What was hard? I mean, again, I finally, for the first time, we talked about last week when we talked, and you were like, I've never dated anyone before. And I was like, well, honey, I didn't say honey at the time.
That would have been weird. I would have run for the hills at that.
I was like, I've never dated a Christian before. I've never dated someone like you before, and like for the first time meant it. So
Mm-hmm.
like I was fearful because I mean at the time I knew you knew that I had a kid, but I was like, man, how do I not mess this up? Because having a kid makes this so messy. And I was like, as mature and spiritual as she seems, I was there. It was still so hard. Like I just don't know if she's gonna be able to make it past this. I was like, I can take her on a million dates and do all the right things and be emotionally available and emotionally mature and take care of her and guard her heart
Mm-hmm.
like your mom told me to do at the gym that one time. Like I could do all those things, and then at the end of the day, you could still be like, I'm just not, I'm just not ready to marry someone with a
Yeah.
kid.
Well, and there
And
are plenty of godly people out there who it's like they could be in that situation and it's not the right thing for them to
yeah,
that point. Like you don't have to do it just because you love God. You don't have to marry a guy with a kid.
yeah. So for me, going into it, that was still what was difficult, and almost because of who I had seen, and I think I can't remember who I told Olin, Chuck, Mark, Parker, one of those guys, James, Duke,
Just keep
all
going.
the groomsmen. I remember like when someone asked me something about you, I was like, "There's just something about her." Like when she walks into a room, like I was like, I just feel. It sounds cheesy to say, but you just feel God's presence because I know how, whether you want to say how spiritual or how like, we'll just say that for lack of better terms, but like how close you are to the Lord, even in comparison to myself. And so I think because of that, I held you to this standard, and I was like, I have to come from here. Even on my best of days, I'm down here. She's up here. This might even be off camera. I don't know. We're just winging it. But I was like, even if I do somehow climb my way up here, I was like, and again, these were lies
Right, I say
that are
that's
being,
very generous and not
yeah,
true.
this is a big old lie. No, just
Hey,
kidding. But the lie of once you get up here and you have the kid conversation, it's
right,
going to drag you right back down.
right.
And then good luck getting back up there. So going into it, that was the most challenging.
Well, it
Might
goes
have,
back to that unworthiness too.
yes. Now challenging during. Again, it's always been challenging, especially being in Birmingham. So he's from Auburn, has always lived here with his mom, has grown up in an amazing family here, God fearing family. So
Hmm.
like he's he's been raised by a lot of people, but a lot of people that love him more than I've seen a lot of kids loved, which has
Absolutely,
been amazing.
absolutely.
So like God, we talked about last week, God writes the best stories. At this point, I feel like we're all just a part of his story,
Oh
and I
yeah,
can't wait to see where that story
yeah.
goes. But even during that, like when we were when I was in Birmingham, like weekends I have him before I'd introduce you to him. I was like, man, I want to hang out with
That was
Mariah.
hard.
So it was hard in the sense that I was like, man, I'm trying to pursue this woman because like if I do marry this woman, she now becomes number one priority. Like how do you wrestle that? And so struggling through like trying to still like my son's in town, like go be with your son, be the father you're supposed to be. And
Hmm.
again, like because that war is going on in my head, the enemy gets into my head pretty easily. But again, like, oh, you're a bad father, you're inadequate as a father, you don't care for him and love him as much as you should because you're pursuing this girl that might turn you down. Like it was just very challenging, but for me it was more so up here.
Yeah,
Now again, scheduling was challenging. Now that might have all changed once you got introduced and it was more so like we can hang out with him. But leading up to that, like what about you? Difficult parts for you?
yeah. I think like to be transparent, there were a lot of difficult parts. Which before we started filming today, I said like I want to make sure we're honoring all the people who are part of this conversation, and so like I don't want to get on here and be like it was just hard because it was hard. Like all the challenges of blended family from dating even through marriage, like I have to step back and realize like they're hard a lot of times because of my selfishness because and there's it looks different in any situation, but it was hard because like I want to hang out with this guy that I like and that I'm
Love.
trying to date. Well, at the time I liked you, but grew to love. Um, but he's with his son, and like I fully supported. Like when Charles was in town, I would have been mad if you were with me instead of him. And like we had that conversation. I was like, when he's in town, you're with him. I will be here, and I will still be here when he goes back to Auburn. Like that's okay. And so I felt like even though it sounds like you were battling that in your head, like we were on the same page of like I feel like I respected that for you to be with him. Um But it did. I remember like when we had been texting and had decided like yes we're going to go on a date. I think it took like 3 weeks to find a day that we could go out just with the schedule of when he was in Birmingham, but also I think there was a holiday around that time, and so like the logistics make that hard. Looking back, it's not a huge deal at all.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing that I had to work through was my expectation of in my head what I thought it was supposed to look like, because I've come to learn with like every family is different, but also every blended family is different. And so you can't say like, oh, well, my friend had like a step mom or step parent, and that's what this looked like. So this is what our relationship is going to look like. Cause that's not true at all. And so, there were a lot of expectations that I had of maybe what Austin would be doing or what he was responsible for that really wasn't true because he had so much support around him, and like praise God for that. But I would have to be like, oh, that wasn't what I expected. Um, and so rewiring with that. And then as our relationship progressed, also communicating those expectations to other people, because then I got used to kind of the rhythm we had found and what we were doing in our relationship with Charles and without Charles. And like I had come to understand how that worked. Involved a lot of time at your house, your parents' house, which like was worth it. It probably wasn't what I expected beforehand, but it was worth it for our relationship and also for what's best for this kid. But then communicating those expectations to other people, like my family or my friends who have all the best intentions and are like, oh, like, well, you're going to get engaged to this guy who has a kid, or you're engaged. Like, are we ever going to meet him? And kind of me being like, well, not really. And like, you don't need to. And that was kind of the rhythm we had found, but also doesn't like isn't true for everyone. But it was hard taking that and communicating it to other people. And I was also fighting a lot of like inner battles through that too, of like, okay, you are walking around with an 8-year-old and you're 26 years old. People can do the math and they're going to think you had a kid in high school. And really realizing that I cared a lot more about what people thought and that it doesn't matter. But I would have never realized that before having to wrestle through those. So there were a lot of little challenges along the way, but ultimately I think they were ones that drew me closer to God and us closer to ourselves, and like the three of us, including Red, closer to each other as well. It's like it's sanctification, the process of like becoming more Christ-like, but it sometimes is really hard. I think it all the time. All the time. That's not a phrase. It always is really hard. Sure. But it's good.
How does it feel now being called bro by someone every other weekend?
Well, happens at school every day, and I nip it in the
I
butt.
guess you're used to it.
Well, it's like if a 8-year-old at school's like, so bro, I'm like, hey, I'm not your bro, I'm Miss Boone, I'm a teacher. But then you have a little 9-year-old sitting here on the couch playing video games. He's like, bro, hey bro, can you give me some pizza? I'm like, yeah, bro, sounds good. No, I mean, like,
but on a more real note, like after. So again, we and we can even talk about the shift when we actually what was like the first time you met Charles, if you remember.
I'm curious. I do. Do you remember?
Was it at Target?
It was at Target.
Yeah, so I can talk about that and then you can talk about but I think even after that the dynamic of the relationship changed, I think in a good way. Or some of those difficult things became a little bit easier and maybe some new difficult things came in. And then we can kind of touch on like boom, after we're married.
Yeah.
What does that look like? But yeah, so we were Charles's favorite place forever has been Target. And it's because Mimi, my mom, Kathy, but Mimi to Charles, who so funny thing, I think we've talked about this like again whenever I tell people the wild Charles story. Again, I was joking with someone the other day. I always joked that I'd never had a cool testimony. I always
seriously
before all of this.
Oh, okay.
I was always like, Mom, my testimony is so boring. and then boom, flash
Here you
forward, find
go.
out you have a kid. Like, I guess I was technically 21 when he was born. Joanna was 20. So fast forward, and then I don't find out about him until a year and a half. So I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. I was like,
You got
God,
what you wished
it's
for.
fine. Don't add anything else to it. It's great. Love my testimony. But I remember people were like, well, how was that? Like, at the very beginning, I literally thought, again, Mountain Brook, all buttoned up all the time. Everybody needs to know, like, you're doing life like you're supposed to be doing. So I remember I told my sister first in my family, because I was like, I'm going to call a family meeting. I'm going to tell them I need you there on my team. She was through the roof excited.
Aunt Carol's the best aunt.
She is amazing.
Yeah.
I love my sister to death, would do
We love you,
anything
Carol.
for her. But she was like, oh my God, I can't wait to be an aunt. Like, oh, and I was like, okay, well, baby steps first. I was like,
Right.
if they kill me, you might not be an aunt. So I was like, let's just handle this one step at a time. And so, but there's a real fear that, like, I was going to tell my parents and they were going to disown me, which, again, more lies. Like, they hadn't done
Right.
anything to show me that they would have done that. Now, rightfully so, I think they expressed some concern and stuff like that when I told them. So that was on a weekend. I think the next weekend, Joanna was like, do you want me to bring Charles to Birmingham so they can meet him? And from that moment, my mom has been wrapped around that little boy's finger in the most amazing way possible. To say that she plays the role of grandmother perfectly would be an understatement. As far as what you're supposed to do, spoiling them, letting them stay up past their bedtime, just what grandmothers do. So, but
Target. Bring
Mimi
it back.
is always going to Target, getting groceries and stuff like that. And so whenever Red's in town, obviously he's going with her, and we were talking. He used to be really, 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 really cute. And now he's in that
He
bro
is
stage.
still
He's cute in a different way,
Yeah.
but cute to the point where you couldn't say no to him. And so
Yeah.
every time he would go to Target, would get toys. So anytime, even if mom literally had to go to Target for like a loaf of bread, she's like, I'm literally only going for bread. I'm not getting anything else but bread. Charles like, can I go? And then next thing you know, $250 later, I'm like, so what all did you get? So anyway, me, her, and him are going to Target, and I think I was just talking to you and on the phone or texting.
Yeah, I had been to the coffee shop that morning, I think grading and doing report cards. Just normal teacher
So
stuff.
I texted, I was like, so what are you up to? And you're like, oh, I'm at Target, like grocery shopping. And I was like, which one? And
Well, no, you even said, "Oh, we are too," but I'm sure it's different ones.
I think I said we're on the way. I was like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, we're on the way. But I figured you had gone to like a Hoover Target.
Well, and I usually do, but I was at the coffee shop near the 281.
Yeah. So anyway, we're at the 281, and then as we're talking, we find out we're both at the same one, and then like run into one another, and was like, I think you had already met. Had you
I had
met
met your
Kathy at
mom.
that
Yeah,
point?
we
Yeah,
met on
yeah.
our first
So
date.
Kathy was like, yeah, hey, Mariah. And then I got to be like, well, in a very anticlimactic but almost perfect
It was
way,
perfect. Like
here's
divinely
Charles.
orchestrated.
And so Charles, it didn't have to be this, all right, Charles, we're going to dinner with this girl that blah, blah. It was just like, boom, hey, Mariah, here's my son, Charles. Charles, here's my friend, Mariah. Met, boom, and then moved on.
Yeah.
And both of us, I think, were kind of like this huge sigh of relief. And then from that point, I was comfortable being like, hey, you've met him. He's here for the weekend. Instead of having to hang out separately, like, why don't you come over and hang out, and you can actually get to know him a little bit more. And like, we can, like, our relationship can actually, like, I was ready to go to the next level with you as far as a relationship goes. I was ready to introduce you, but there was still like, how do you do it? It doesn't need to be this big grand thing. It doesn't be. So God was like, let me do it for you. And I was like, well, you've done everything else perfect so far, so sure.
It was one because that was early in our relationship, like within the first month or two of the Target interaction. And it just seemed like we have a friend who uses the phrase a God wink, but it seemed like a God wink of God being like, hey, I don't have to do this, but I am to show you my favor in this situation. And it was really cool. I can still picture little Red he was sitting in the shopping cart playing on Mimi's phone, and it was still in the day of mask. So he had his like Spider-Man lanyard with his mask
Oh
on.
yeah.
And it was just the sweetest thing because then I think it was still probably a month after that before I came over for movie night. But it, like even in that moment, I was like, "Hey, do you remember my friend Mariah? You met her at Target." He was like, "Oh, okay, hey," and like went on. And so it was cool because I think we both would have made it this huge thing of like, we're meeting the kid, but it wasn't. It was so easy and casual.
Yeah. So then, I mean, I feel like that mostly covers. I mean, obviously the dynamic changes there when we can start hanging out more, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can even get into what when you feel like your relationship with Charles started to change, if you've ever actually thought about that.
Yeah, I
Um,
actually have.
and then we can even get into like, okay, then we got married, and I know there's, and I want you to talk about what you told me about before this about what Lydia said.
Mm-hmm.
But then even some of the other troubles, because there's some, and we don't have to. I think more people involved in his life are on the same page now, slash closer to being on the same page as far as a lot of different aspects. But like even at the beginning, I feel like a lot of people were on different pages, and I feel like there was some. I don't feel like, I know there was some frustration on your part. Is like, what role do I play? Because this is what's going on. Or like if there's a day when you bring him home from the gym while I close up the gym, and you're like I'm his stepmom, he's doing this, being defiant in this way, and I don't necessarily feel like I have the authority to do, like, I don't know, there's just a lot of hard things that you've had to wrestle through. But first,
Yeah.
when do you feel like the dynamic of like, oh, what's up, Mariah, Austin's friend, to actually like, I feel like he really loves you and enjoys you at this moment. So
Well, I think so. I do think like my relationship with Charles has been like me and him, that has been easy. I think there's been other factors that have been challenging, but I'm so thankful that it was never hard to connect with him and to build a relationship with him, which has been a blessing that like I don't deserve. So like praise God for that. But I really feel like it changed around like November, December of it was like I guess our only year of dating during Christmas. But so this would have been like
was
four
this a year
months.
before we got married?
Yes.
Okay.
Like we started dating in April of 2021. So this was like the November, December of 2021. Um, and I think I just spent more time there, and there were things like that Red enjoyed doing that he started asking me to do with him. Like I think he knew early on, don't ask Mariah help with video games because she can't help you.
Hmm.
But like I don't know if he was playing baseball or something at that point, or just games at the house where he would start asking me to play with him. I remember playing in the pool one time, like throwing diving toys, and just those things where I could tell on his side she's not just this random girl sitting on the couch next to dad. Like she's someone here who like is consistent and dependable. Um, I think it changed there. And then there was one time over Christmas break that year, we had gone to see Spider-Man at like midnight.
Mm-hmm.
And so we ended up having a sleepover in because you lived with your parents at the
Yeah.
time. And so we ended up having a sleepover. And from that moment, Red was like, Mariah's my sleepover buddy. And he thought it was the
You need to
coolest
tell them
thing.
because right now you're telling everybody you slept over with me before we were married, but tell them what that really entailed.
Yeah, we got to take it from like PG-13 to like G.
Yeah.
So Austin's
Because I
room,
think people will get a kick out of this.
yeah. So Austin's room is a separate room, and Red had his own room at the time.
Carol's old room.
Yeah, because when we started dating, I think he was actually in your room because Carol still lived there, and then she had moved out.
Yeah,
I
I
know that
think
for a
so.
fact because I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Again,
Yeah.
rewiring expectations. But Red had his own room, and he had two twin beds in there. So there was Red's bed, and then there was a second bed that was kind of Carol's bed, but Red had named it the snack bed. So he had this big TV on the wall, and he would like bring snacks in there and eat snacks in the snack bed.
Which is genius.
Yeah,
Because you
because then
don't
you
want
don't get crumbs in your
in their
bed.
sleeping bed. Yes.
Yeah. So that's how it was. And I don't even think it had been a conversation of sleeping over before this point.
Oh,
And
no.
it was never sleeping over at Austin's house. Never. It was, let's
I
have a
didn't have a
sleepover
house.
with Red. Well, yeah. Or not even like, let's sleep over with Austin. That was never on the radar for either of us. But we had seen this movie, got back to your place at like 2:30. I think I was going to be there the next day or something. And so y'all were like, let's just spend the night if you want to. You can sleep in Red's room. So I slept in the snack bed and we had a sleepover. And
Probably stayed up way too late talking.
oh yeah, he just wanted to stay up all night talking, and he found a way to like pull off lint from a pillowcase and make it a spider web. And I still have a picture on my phone of like little 6-year-old Red shooting his spider webs, and it was the most fun. And I don't know, it was just really really cool. And we ended up doing that a couple more times. And it was never so I could spend the night with you. It was
Yeah.
like, hey, Red and I are having a sleepover. Like he would go to bed.
I'd be like, see y'all
He's
later.
like, I'm going to bed. Y'all have fun with your sleepover. And we would stay up all night talking. And so that was a big change in our relationship where I think it got deeper. It was weird at that time because he would be like, yeah, I had a sleepover with my friend and we did this. Will you do this with me? And I was like, well, how old was that friend? Well, my age. And I was like, okay, well, like, I'm not 7, I'm not 6 years old. Like,
Yeah.
I am an adult, so I'm not going to play those games that you're doing. But that was a big change. And that was also around the time where I was very confident you were the person I was going to marry.
Mhm.
And so those two almost went hand in hand of like my relationship with Red grew. And I also saw where our relationship was going to. What was your other question? How it changed after?
Yeah, the next is just, I mean, boom, we get married. So now the dynamic changes forever.
Yeah. Well, when you
now
talk,
you're officially committed to me and him. You now have 2 of me in your life.
well, 3
Actually,
because there's a
3.
dog.
We'll address the dog here in a second for all of our people. But you literally signed up for 1, and then when the delivery came, there was 3 of me. And
well, I mean, to push back, I really did sign up for 2. Like,
oh, that's true.
Marrying you always meant you and Red. And
Good save.
Thank you. But like that was important to me of like if I like I said, I never had a hard time connecting with Red, but that would have been a really hard spot if like things with us were going great and with him were not. But like it was y'all were always a package deal. But yeah, now there's 2 of y'all. So like all the little pet peeves I may have that you do, he just happens to do them too.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's something. But yeah, we got married, and I do think a hard thing, really back up through engagement, was like, okay, what is my role in this? Because, like we said, Red has a lot of really supportive and loving people in his life.
He's been raised by a lot. There's a lot of opinions on life that have gone into him being raised.
And now I'm adding more opinions too. And so,
and that's even been hard on us.
Yeah.
Us figuring out what impact do we want to have on him. So again, Chuck and Lydia, for example. I mean, Brooks, Claire, Radford.
Can you do it all?
Caroline, Abigail.
Good
I was trying
job.
to do it in order. 5 of probably the most amazing children you have / will ever meet. I still remember, and I don't even know if Chuck or Lydia watched this, but I've told Chuck this one time. I still remember Radford is 16 now, 15, 16. He might be 15.
9th grade, whatever that is.
He recently started driving. I don't know if it was by himself or with Chuck in the car. I think he's
Keep
15.
going.
So, but maybe when he was 13 or 14 working out at Iron Tribe in Birmingham, there was another kid in his class. And more often than not, people I interacted with his age, I would hate interacting with them because you're like, oh my gosh, they're not going to make eye contact. They're going to give you 1-word answers. And there's this one kid that was the case. Even when something as simple as coming up after a class, they'd come up and I'd be like, hey, what was your score? What weight did you use? Like, he'd be like, 60 pounds, 120, like just not, and it was so awkward. And then Radford Andrews comes up just full of confidence and just reads off his score, direct eye contact the whole time. Hey, I'm just carried on like I felt like I was talking to a 40-year-old man who was genuinely interested in me. And I remember telling Chuck and Lydia, I was like, your kids are amazing. And I remember them being like, that's because we didn't raise our kids, we trained our kids.
Right. Like it didn't happen by accident.
There's a difference in the way that we have parented and what we have decided to do together from the get-go on how we want to train our kids
Mm-hmm.
and like train them up in the faith, train them up appropriately.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think that even hit us hard because we were like,
It didn't hit me
shoot.
hard. I was already there, which
So it's
brings
true.
it
Well,
back to the challenges.
I think it hit me hard because I was like, crap. Like, there are aspects about Charles and the way he interacts with people that, well, at the time that I was like, again, you would talk to him and he would just be on his iPad. He might say, I would have to be like, dude, can you say hey to Julie? And he'd be like, hey. And I'm like, can you make eye contact? Like, things like that, where again,
like eye contact, engage, ask a
carry on a
question.
conversation,
Yeah.
like, and so it was things like that where I think even you beforehand had been like, well, there's a reason this is happening. Like, this is a conversation we need to have. And then I think you're talking to Chuck and Lydia, and then I was like, crap. Like, I was like, we need to have a conversation. And you're like, oh, great idea that I
Oh
had
yeah, we do
months
need to have a
ago.
conversation. You're so smart.
But I think that has been and still is one of the harder things because even so, now that we're in Auburn, it used to be one of those things where I would see him 3, 6 out of 30 days, whatever that is, 20% of the time. Is
Sure.
that?
It's not math class. Just make it up and go with it.
So I would see him 20% of the time. So like when he's with me, my main priority was like, let's enjoy our time together. Let's continue to foster our relationship as father and son. This was my skewed view, but I was like, I don't have that much impact because 80% of his time is outside of here. Not that anyone was doing anything wrong, but maybe in my head, I was like, I don't necessarily agree with everything that's going on.
But you also may have different priorities or like be more aware of things
Yeah.
that other people may have just not noticed.
But even when we came down here and we started seeing him more, that's where I feel like we've been wrestling. Man, what does that look like? Like, what does like setting those boundaries look like? What does like establishing some rules and things that go on? Like, what does some of that actually look like? And how do we instill that? How do we maybe talk to Joe and Clay and make sure everybody's on the same page? How about when he goes to Birmingham to make sure that if Mariah, Joe, Clay are doing things here in Auburn, how do we make sure like he doesn't go to Birmingham and things get undone there. So like that's where I feel like at times we almost felt paralyzed because we're like, what can we do?
I think for me that has been the source of like the most, I don't know the right word for it, like frustration almost in stepping into this unique situation. And because I assume everyone, if not probably a lot of women, like you have this idea of like, hey, when I have kids, here's how I want to raise them, here's what I want to do. And my parents were really intentional growing up of like, we're going to have family devotionals, we're going to eat dinner together, we're going to pray at the dinner table, we're going to do all these things. Like family was a huge priority. And as a teacher, I see lots of kids with lots of different, kind of like you said, you can a lot of times see kids who are raised a certain way with certain expectations at home. You notice that. And so I very early on would get frustrated because I was like, okay, here's this kid who like I plan on choosing to commit my life to you and to Red. So I'm stepping in and like I'm giving him my full love as if he were my own. But I also don't get that level of control, for lack of a better word, because he's like, the reality is he's not my own biological kid. And so there are some situations where it slaps you in the face of like, yep, you're giving your all and he's not yours and you have to deal with that. But also like that's okay. Like it's a situation that I chose and it's okay. And like kind of like you said, even if we don't have the influence we want, we actually have more than we realize. And while we were engaged, I was sharing some of our difficulties and challenges with Red and different dynamics and expectations in my role, and just sharing like this is hard because like it's hard to step into what's being a stepmom, which that word is still weird to me, but like that's hard. And
You can be a
Lydia
stepmo.
step I don't any step anything, I don't know, we need a new name for it. But Lydia said, because she had a friend walk through a similar situation, and she was like, you know, Mariah, you've got to separate things that are hard because it's just hard to be a mom sometimes. So there's mom hard, but then there are other situations that are hard because of the blended family that you've stepped into. So there's mom hard and there's stepmom hard. And that's helped me realize a lot more things are hard just because they're mom hard. And like, I am not trying to take the place of Charles's mom. He has a wonderful mother, and it's just like bonus mom is a better word. But it's like there are things that are hard because I am mother figure to this kid in these situations. And part of that is harder because this kid came into my life when he was 6 years old and through different ways than the traditional way. And so part of it is like, yeah, I didn't choose it the way a lot of couples do, but even you realize a lot of couples don't always plan things and it doesn't always go the way you think it's going to go. And you get over it and you move on. And there are other things that are hard because it's stepmom hard and because you're in a really unique situation with lots of different challenges. And so, like, I feel like there have been a lot of different challenges, big and small, of figuring out, like, okay, how do we communicate with other people who want Red and want his time and feel like they have influence over them? How do we almost assert the position that we're in? Because while you did have a lot of support, I think in some ways that made it hard for you to find your place as his dad, which I think has helped. Number one, being married and being able to do more on your own, but also moving here. So, like, parts are just hard. But like I said, a lot of even the mom hard things, that's just hard because I'm selfish. And I think it's hard for most parents because when you have a kid, their priorities matter. And so, like, things can be hard because you don't want to get off the couch and put a frozen pizza in the oven, or you don't want to spend your evening watching this kids movie. You want to watch the new Love Is Blind reunion that just released. Don't roll your eyes at me. But I'm sure all of our viewers are watching that too.
No, they're watching this.
Yeah.
They're watching what real love looks like.
Yeah. Love is not blind.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
love has a kid.
okay. But I think like those moments where I'm like, you know, this is just hard because like I'm being selfish, and really is my life gonna be terrible if I don't get to watch this reunion show tonight? No, it won't, and I'll be okay.
Probably better.
It probably will, but you know what? I still fit it in this morning. So yeah. So all that to say, yes, there have been challenges of all kinds in every way, but I would not trade any of it for whatever alternative in my mind there could be. Like it is worth it. And it's like I'm happy. It's a good life.
Story, so
God's story.
We're just living in it.
We're trying to best we can. What do you want to add about that?
No,
any other challenges you faced or
I'm sure
unexpected?
there's more. I mean, we could go for 2 hours talking about good, bad. No, I'm trying to think of any like takeaways we can give them. You know.
Yeah, I do think one of my takeaways was, I don't even know if this takeaway, but I'm going to say it. One area I struggled in while we were dating was I had no frame of reference for what does it look like to be a Christian in a non-traditional family. Like I had been to all the youth group conversations about dating and marriage, and none of them ever talked about what do you situation. Yeah. What do you do when you're dating a guy with a kid? And that was really hard. And like to be transparent, to be radically honest, I got some pushback and some judgmental comments and probably comments behind my back from godly people who probably didn't fully understand our situation. And that's one thing that I don't know where God's going to lead our lives, but I could see myself becoming very passionate of like, we as a church need to, number one, acknowledge that not everyone, like, who even has a traditional, like, the traditional marriage that you think. Like, yes, it can look that way on the outside, but it's probably not that way on the inside. And so, like, I think we need to be more transparent about marriage is not going to look so cookie cutter, and that's okay, and God is still glorified. Um, because there are people, like, if I was looking for direction and for encouragement and just for wisdom in the situation I stepped into, I cannot be the only one. Which I think was why I was one. I was like, this has to be our third episode because no one talks about what it's like to be in a blended family, and I don't even know what to say about it because I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah. No, that
But
makes
just
sense.
talk, kind of like in the beginning.
My takeaway, encouragement, advice would be, I mean, like, I don't think we would be where we're at. Well, I mean, obviously, first and foremost, you gotta say without God. Shout out God. He's watching.
Yeah,
He is.
he is.
Currently, he doesn't even have to wait for the recording. He watches it live. Anyway,
some deep theology, Austin.
There you go. But like, you need to have people, especially for us. I think you even said you had a friend that was like, I was looking for like newlywed Christian marriage podcasts out there, and she's like, there's really not a whole, not that we're trying to take over in that realm, but like, life is messy. Like,
And it still is, for the
nobody's
record.
perfect. Most people run from honesty and just live these shell of lives trying to put on their best for other people and pretend like everything's great when everything's really falling apart. And but my advice to people in our, not situation, but people like, people our age, like from the very beginning, we sought out people older than us. And even though Chuck and Lydia are literally the opposite of us, like, blended family that no one talks about, boom, family that has gone and multiplied like you're called to, um like 5 kids, all trained, amazing marriage, like the people that were like, we work on our marriage day in and day out. Even now, like, when you look at them and you're like, have everything together, they're like, no, we are still constantly working on our marriage. Like, we sought them out, and they probably gave us some of the better wisdom that we've had the whole time. Again, like, we didn't have to seek out people in our unique situation, but we were like, let's get people who are God-fearing, biblical people who just genuinely care about us and are going to help. So
and
whether
who will tell
that's,
you the truth and be honest.
oh yeah, so whether that's Olin and Lena, whether that's Chuck and Lydia, like Parker and Lauren, like any of those people, find those people. And if you don't have them, find them quickly, regardless of what stage. I found them like from the moment I became a Christian. And so that's just been kind of a pattern for me. And like, as soon as we started dating, found them, brought them in, like a different group of people, and those people have continued. Now that we've moved to Auburn, I feel like we're in the process of like, what do those new people even look like? I even was telling Dana the other day, I was like, we have these friends. I told her they really need to meet Chuck and Lydia. Her and Lydia
You're
would hit
just
it
making
off.
this an Andrew's Family like fan club
Yeah,
podcast.
that's what's gonna be the subtitle today. But I was even telling Dana, I was like, you and Rob can be like our Auburn Chuck and Lydia. So, but like, find those people, because you don't have to find someone in your specific situation, because all kinds of people can speak wisdom into that. And if we become those people for some people one day, great. If not, oh well. But at least we did a podcast.
There you go.
So, questions. Somebody asked last week, what's up with the dog in between y'all? So this is
You can tell them.
I don't want people to think it's like a memorial pillow.
Oh no,
He's
not
alive
at
and
all.
well.
He's very alive, very well.
This is a pillow representation of Kilo. Not most people think of like Narcos, like, you know, the drug shows, like a kilo of
Well, there are some police dogs named Kilo because of what they search and find.
Yeah.
If you're tracking.
Yeah. But because I work in the fitness industry and you measure things by kilograms or pounds as far as like what you lift, I was like, oh, Kilo would be a cute name. So, but he's our parking lot dog. That while Mariah, here's some other advice
story so that
to you
I
guys.
Don't be unkind.
Maybe wait till you're married to make stupid decisions like this. I almost ruined it in one foul swoop. But while she was away for 3 weeks, in Chattanooga,
for grad school, working hard.
This dog, I'm not gonna give you the whole story. If you want it, comment #Kilo story, and we'll give you Kilo's story. But he was pretty much dropped off at the gym as a puppy and was like, nobody else at the gym could take him. We posted him everywhere. It was like, hey, this is your dog. Come get him. It was kind of weird. He had a harness. He was
a weird
freshly groomed, like smelled like he literally just got groomed. Nails were cut. Teeth were clean. Everything looked perfect about this dog. And so it was a weird situation.
But he was wandering the parking lot.
Exactly.
So did our due diligence.
So we were like, hey, if this is your dog, come claim him. But he needed to go somewhere for the night. My parents had, in the past couple of years, put their dog down. And so everyone else at the gym were like, they're like, well, I already have like 2 or 3 dogs that would not get along. Like, I would love to. And so I called Kathy and was like, so, there's a dog. So I gave her I think she secretly knew. She was like, if you bring this dog home, you are going to keep this dog. But essentially took him home. And for a week, for 7 to 10 days, brought him home for the night. Also, this is another weird thing. When I got home, set up my sister's golden retriever's old kennel in my room, and jokingly one night was like, kennel, and he ran in there, turned around, and sat down. And I was like, this mother trucker is crate trained.
Some kind of trained.
So anyway, would take him home for the night, bring him back to the gym in case someone came by to claim him. So continued that for like 7 to 10 days. They got to the point where I was like, I really actually want to keep this dog, but was like waiting for someone to come claim him. Anyway,
by day 2, he was like, I really hope no one says this dog is theirs because I want it.
Anyway, she's gone to grad school. I was in the middle of class. And I was like, I think we have a dog.
Yeah, so I'm sitting in the middle of class, and it's like a very small class, so a professor would know if I was texting while he's teaching. And he's blowing up my phone and is like, this dog got dropped off. I think I'm going to keep this dog. I asked my mom. She said I could bring it home. And I am like panicking. I'm like, this guy is about to take this dog home. We are getting married.
We weren't married. We weren't engaged.
No, we were engaged.
Oh, we were?
We were engaged and we were getting married.
If you're engaged, do it.
We were getting married in like 6 months. And so I feel like if we were dating, it would have been different. But I even texted you and I was like, okay, I know you think, or I don't think I said it like that.
My heart's too big.
Well, you have the biggest heart, and so I knew you wanted this dog. But what I was trying to communicate was like, I know you're thinking as single Austin right now, or dating Austin, we're not making decisions together. It's that weird engagement stage where you're not married, but you will be. But in 6 months, you're moving into my little apartment, and we will be responsible for this dog, and you're committing to take out this dog at like 5 a.m. before work in the middle of the rain sometimes. And that's what you're committing to. And he was like, but he's cute. I was like, I don't care how cute he is. When it's 5 a.m. and it's raining and cold and I've got to walk this dog, he's not going to be so cute. So I don't think I actually said no, but I was...
Ladies, if you need to say no, say no.
But I was not on board. And I think put up every, like, you need to think about this. You need to think about this. You think about this. Have you thought about this? Well, this means this. And you even like pulled up your budget and was like, I can make it work and all this stuff. And so
anyway, long story short,
we kept the dog.
We kept the dog. He's in Birmingham with my parents.
Thank
They
goodness.
were like, we'll keep him since y'all are uprooting, moving to Auburn. So in the meantime, until y'all get a house, we'll keep him. So he's alive and well. I think they secretly really like him.
And I would love that. He can stay.
No, he's coming to Auburn sometime. So Auburn peeps, Get ready for Kilo's homecoming.
Yes.
We're throwing a party.
So I got you this shortly before we moved. So
And then Charles wanted one, so Charles has one
yeah,
too.
we have 2 Kilo pillows.
All right, so last updates
Mhm.
on our 5 C's.
Yeah.
So again, in the spirit of being radically honest, like we could easily go through these and we could have been like, it was such a great exercise, like we got so close and our marriage is for no. This is hard. When we talked earlier, I was like, all of the confess on here are all the things that I committed to that I did not do this week.
Yeah.
So I was like, whether that was quiet time and not getting in the word, whether it was not, I think I did 10% of the things on here. And I think in talking, so we kept these the same. We're actually going to put them up on the refrigerator. So they're actually like, so I think these were on the table. And then over here to the side, there's a mountain of laundry. But I think they got buried in the
You're getting
laundry
really
at
honest
some
today.
point. But I think at least what I realized, and maybe your realization was another, is like and I think our default over the last year has been just to kind of coast. Because again, like our marriage, like I think we both realize because we are covenantally bound to one another, like our marriage will never head towards divorce. Like just not an option. Correct?
Correct, but I also think that mindset can allow some people to excuse a lot of wrong.
Yeah.
That
That's
can
not what I
actually put
mean.
some people though in a place where that comes back on the table.
Yeah.
We're not there.
Yes, but what
but
I'm
I see where
saying
you're
is,
going.
I think because that's like in the back of our minds, we're like we can just kind of like I think year one we just kind of drifted along, and nothing went terribly wrong. Now we'll get into like our marriage is nowhere near where we thought it was, and it needs a lot of work. But I think we were like, oh crap, like this is gonna take like day in, day out work, check-ins. Like we're gonna have to like really pursue this if we want this to like take effect. And I think it's gonna be tough at the beginning, but then as these things become habit and become part of our routines, then I think they should in theory become a little bit easier. Now different challenges will come up, but I mean I think it's gonna be something to where it should be something we're constantly working towards. But I think that was my big, I was like, oh, another week that I just let it be on cruise control, which I shouldn't have. And so that was a big thing for me to actually like, okay, let's take action because I don't want to get to the end of another week and be like, crap, we cruise again, and then another week cruise again, and then now it's 2025 and we're like, dang it, we just cruised for 2 years.
Yeah, and there gets to be a point where like, well, I haven't done it yet, so what's the point of trying?
Exactly.
And we don't want to get
so
there.
that was my big takeaway. I don't want to put those words in your mouth, but I know I fell short on almost every single one of these, and it sucked confessing that to you because again, I was like, crap, I've failed you as a husband. I failed you in so many ways, but I think what we even talked about is like the marriage that we want, the husband that I want to be, like that person looks and lives completely differently. Like he pursues his wife completely differently, and that means the husband that I am now has to change in a good way to become the husband that is pursuing you every single day and doing these things and being the husband that God has called me to be and that you need me to be.
Yeah. There are a lot of things like as you're processing through where that's not the same for me, which I think part of, I don't know why this has been on my mind, but just part of I think I've had to acknowledge this week is like we are 2 separate people and we are similar in a lot of ways. We do a lot together, but there are a lot of things like we are different on, and that is okay. That's why we communicate, and that's what makes marriage great. Can also be what makes it hard. You're always very much like in college we talked about like the maximizers and the developers. So I see you as like the maximizer. We're getting into like our educational psychology here. They're both good.
Is a maximizer better than a developer?
You would say it was because you're a maximizer.
Perfect.
But You
You
are
heard it here first.
You're a maximizer, so you want everything and everyone to be at 100%. And
Deal.
you measure growth by how close are you to this standard, and everyone has the same standard. Whereas a developer is are you better than you were yesterday? Are you growing from where you were yesterday? And that's where I am. It's very much how I am as a teacher, very much how you are as a coach with maximizing. But so I looked at this and I was like,
victory.
No, but progress. And so there were some areas where I was like, okay, I maybe didn't do this every day, but I did it 2 days a week or 3 days a week.
Most of mine I didn't do any days. So that's why the maximizer in me is
So maybe
failure.
I am better. No,
you failed.
Kidding.
So I think that's why my reaction was so extreme.
I agree.
Had I gotten in the word 3 out of 7 days, I think I would have been progress.
But I also
0 out of 7 to 0 out of 7 is
right. Well, and you shouldn't
no
celebrate
progress.
that. You got to be brutally honest and hey, that's not okay. We got to radically honest. And we got to do better. But as we were talking through this, there were some areas where maybe I didn't hit the goal I set, but I was closer than I was if I had not set the goal. And so, kind of like you, my goals, I don't know, goal's not the right word. Our commitment, I guess that's our C, is the same for next week. But I also think you have to acknowledge the progress. And even though you're well, I didn't do any of them, we still have, I think early in the week, we had really intentional, good conversations about some of these things that would not have happened if we hadn't talked through this a few days before. There were also, I'm big on excuses. I'm really good at finding excuses. But then you have to measure, is this excuse valid or is it not? And so, there were some legitimate excuses that came up with work and with family things this week that for me, I'm you know what? It's okay that we didn't, do this on this day because, work became really hectic on this one day. Whereas other ones, well, I had a hard day, so I ate chocolate at school and it was my goal not to do that.
Don't tell people that about me.
Me, Austin, I've got to be brutally honest, radically honest. And so there are points to move forward, but I also think whether you acknowledge this or not, we are both, you're both in a better spot with the intention of moving forward than we would be without this. And going back to what you shared the first week, where you have the frames of where are you now and where do you want to be, I think this almost just shows me wow, I am really far from the person I want to be. And why did I ever expect I would be there in 1 week? And that's okay.
We'll be there in 2.
No,
check back
won't.
in next week.
We'll
be there.
We won't, and that's okay. We should be progressing though. That's all I got.
Perfect. Well, thanks for joining us for episode 3. Again, if you have questions, comments, concerns, I don't know why you'd have
opinions
concerns.
On our outfits or our ghost flavors.
Oh yeah. Who was responsible for us matching last week? My sister got it right, didn't she?
No, she got it wrong.
She guessed you?
She guessed me.
Wow, Carol.
Yikes. Yeah. If you ever see us matching, you can be very confident it is his idea.
Boy.
On our honeymoon, I think we matched 3 days in a row because he thinks it's cute. I thought it was cute when I was 5 years old. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, guess we have some tension to unpack, and you'll hear about next week.
There's next week's episode.
So yeah, thanks again for joining. If it's your first time, if it's your third time, we appreciate you guys. Again, I don't know what we expect out of this. We're just going to continue to dialogue about our marriage, continue to work on it, and put it out there in the hopes that it helps one person. And if it doesn't, it's helping us.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what's most important. So
yeah,
as long as God is glorified, Christ is magnified, and our marriage is an I word.
Maximized.
We'll work on it.
No, we already said magnified for Christ.
Yeah.
We'll work on that for next week.
Yeah.
We have some homework now.
Man, we were close. Could have been a home run. Now it's just a double. Anyway, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. We got to come up with a farewell thing too.
Goodbye.